Good afternoon from here. Can I be heard, please? Can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thanks for the feedback. Luke 15, right? And then a parable was shared by Jesus. And first, we would have to establish what a parable is. That a parable is a fiction-like story. So meaning it's not, it might not really be true in the real sense of the story itself, but to point out some important principles. That in fact that is the whole essence of parable in itself. Parable should not be interpreted by just the story, but by getting the principles out of it. So there is a prodigal son being shared in one of the stories that will be shared by Jesus in Luke 15. So Luke 15 itself has a compound meaning, right? But this story, looking at this story itself, what can one bring out of it? One should bring out the principle of identity, knowing your true identity. Coming to the point where you begin to identify oneself rightly, where you are no longer in doubt of who you are. That your consciousness gets to the peak of it as human or as God that you are. And that is the point the prodigal son will get into. First he will get into the point where he noticed that he could actually seek for his own inheritance, that he does not necessarily need to wait for his father's death. Some person would have waited for their father to die before demanding their inheritance. That does not mean that they are not there. So this is not a moral story, actually. That does not mean that they are far better than the prodigal son. No. The prodigal, and that is why the story was not tailored to the fact that what the action of the prodigal son would do, demanding for his own share, is not totally wrong. It's because he identified himself as a son of a wealthy person, and he would demand, instead of being hypocritical about it, he would demand his own share of what the father has. Excuse me, second. Yeah, can I still be heard, please?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, sorry for the break. So I was saying, so the identity, he acknowledged and identified that he is a son of a wealthy person. So the question would be, personally, individually, what is our level of our consciousness about who we truly are? What is our level of consciousness? Because going forward, this will be what would transform the prodigal son. In fact, this is what the son who is not prodigal, the other son would even fault, is still this identity. So there must be an identity recognition. We must come to terms with who we are in our full consciousness and in the real power that we truly have. That is one. So the after collecting his share of inheritance, he will squander it, and the Bible would say he would squander it on himself, meaning he would get to the point where he realized how powerful he could be, and he would only use it for just himself. And that would lead to squandering. Self-based vision would lead to squandering. Having a knowledge of oneself only for just oneself alone would lead to mismanagement. There is a mismanagement happening in this story, and that will be the fault that the prodigal son would exhibit. That he would squander to the point where he would almost be competing for the same food with animals. And if you check our story, whether as an African or some of us in diaspora, it's almost similar. That the whole essence of our full consciousness is not for anything beyond just self. And some person would think our wealth is talking about money. In this case, I think our wealth is not just money, has also to do with time. What we do with time. That time itself is the resources, unlimited resources that the universe will have given to us. So, but that is not where the story ends, because the true knowledge of self, identity, is the changer. It will get to a point where the prodigal son will suddenly realize that I can go back home. I can go back home. I can do better. My identity is far better than what I'm doing right now. My capacity is far better than what I'm doing right now. My nation is far better than what it is now. I can go back home. So going back home will be figurative, will be explained in several ways, right? Going back to where strength is, where we can draw strength, where we can really maximize our true self, where we can truly get into the point where we are truly God, where the knowledge is not about us being servants. This guy would not take servanthood as a choice. We should not. That is prodigal son. And that is the hallmark of this story. That this prodigal son would not accept, even after squandering, even after the waste, that would not change his identity. His identity to be a servant would not be accepted. It's not acceptable and should not be accepted by any of us here. So the prodigal son will go back home. And the prodigal son will make a statement that even if he has to be a servant, let it be home. Because even at home, identity, still talking about identity, even at home, servanthood are being treated far better than this. Even at home. But this is what home truly is. Home embraces. Home is a powerful mode of strength. Home could be a very strong source of motivation. At the glance of the prodigal son, the father would not treat him as a foreigner. Because home recognizes home. Home, things thrives in home. That is why a fish, no matter how comfortable the sea becomes, it cannot get out of it because that is home. And no matter how interesting the habitat outside water is for a fish, it longs to get home because that is where it thrives. So the prodigal son waits to go home. But this is the mistake of the other son. He thinks it still has to do with what he has done or what he didn't do, not knowing that the powerful tool here is identity, is understanding and recognizing one's true self and identity, and to begin to demand more of such identity than just being servant, than just being a slave, than just being the spectators, than just being the applauders, than just being the one on the back seat to anyone. And that is what the servant would not take, because the servant would have had full understanding of self identity. So thanks, that will be my comments on this. Thanks for listening.